Welcome to World Without You, a Sims 4 story inspired by Belinda Carlisle songs. If you have not watched previous episodes yet, please go watch them. If you watched the previous videos, you already know what to do with the music. So we finished eating, and when Mom was ready, she continued. Shelley and Enrique met each other at the front gate, and they walked together back to the Gutierrez farm. Shelley kept trying to apologize to Enrique. But he kept telling her not to worry about it, that it wasn't her fault. He tried to cheer her up a little bit. Like a good friend would do. But I can only imagine what Shelley was feeling. Her family had disowned her. And she hadn't even done the things she had been accused of. But worse yet is how they had treated Enrique. He had always been good to her family. And he didn't deserve his treatment either. She felt so ashamed of her family. They should have been the ones that were getting shunned, not her, and not him. But she would just have to stay with him for a few weeks, or more, until she could figure out other plans. With Enrique and Shelley gone, it was time for Cornelia to put the second phase of her plan in motion. Enough time had gone by that Enrique had been able to train Fostoria how to make the wine. For the first time in her life, Cornelia went against one of her own policies. She invited Fostoria to live at the farm. It was an offer he couldn't refuse. The condition was that he was to have no contact with Enrique. She would see to it that Enrique was not at home when Fostoria went to get his belongings. And so it was. Fostoria moved into the farm. Meanwhile, Shelley had settled in with Enrique, and after about a week or so, had started to think about what she was going to do. She had already known at some point that she was going to have to break away from the family if she was going to become a veterinarian, and she had already started to plan for it. She had started to save up her own money, and had managed to save up just enough to help her find a place in a new town. But she had no idea where. It was the early 60s, and it seemed like all them college towns had rooms for rent. Shelley was trying to avoid going to one of the bigger schools. She just wanted a small place to start over. So she found one of the smaller towns with a community college, and after checking around the town, found an advertisement. A family named the Medfords had a room for rent. Eugene Medford had married a Native American lady named Shiawassee, and they had a daughter named Segola. And they lived on a normal street, like normal people, and just had a happy life. And their oldest son had gone off to college in another town. They were renting his room out, and so Shelley rented their room and then set about trying to find a job. And she found a nice one. There was a local veterinarian named Oliver Madison, and he had an advertisement for a receptionist. Shelley went in there and told the doctor that while she didn't necessarily have any job experience, she was wanting to go to college to become a vet, and she must have said the right things because he hired her. And so Shelley rented the room and went to work. And then the next phase of her plan was to see about getting into college. So she toured one of the local community colleges that had a veterinary program and went through some orientations and tours and sat in on a few lectures and went about the business of applying. A few weeks later, she had her first day at Mason Community College. She was so excited. She almost ran full speed to her first class. But when she came out, she was feeling really queasy. She wasn't sure if it was something that she had seen in class, or she was sick from something she ate. But after a moment, she gathered herself and got back up. But as she walked away, she felt sick again and made it over to the bushes. Shelley was having morning sickness. She did confirm it with a doctor. She was in fact pregnant. And so she attended college while she was pregnant. And then a few months later, she paid a visit to Enrique to check in with him and to let him know what was going on. Of course, it wasn't his baby. They both knew that. But Enrique didn't know whose it really was, and he didn't need to ask. That was her business. But it just so happened that that day at the Newberry farm, Fostoria had overheard the triplets talking about when they saw Shelley kissing Enrique. And that set him off. And he stormed off to confront Enrique over kissing his girl. He got right in Enrique's face and accused him. And Enrique was just letting him get his anger out. But then Shelley came out of the cowshed and told him to calm down, that he had it all wrong. That's when she told him that it was his baby. But the problem was, he was working for Cornelia. And if Cornelia found out that he was the father of her baby, she might fire him. They would have to keep this a secret. It'd be simple enough, as long as Shelley left town before anybody noticed. So the three of them worked together to come up with a solution. Shelley was still staying with the Medfords, and she was doing fine there. but eventually she'd have to find her own place when the baby came. They all agreed that for the time being, Fostoria would keep working at the Newberry farm. In the meantime, Enrique would help Shelley find a place, and when the time was right, Fostoria could join her. Enrique waited until after Fostoria left to tell Shelley that he had a place that she could stay, and that he had something to tell her that he could only trust her with. He couldn't tell Fostoria until he knew for sure that he could trust him. Enrique told Shelley that they would get on the train in the morning and that they would switch trains to make sure they weren't being followed, and that he would take her to a town where he had a house. And so they did, and they soon arrived at a town that was once known as Granville, and he led her to a house on a street called Ardmore. And then when they went inside, they sat down at this table, and he told her the rest of the story. The first thing that Enrique did was he went to the back room, and a few minutes later he came back and put a bottle of wine on the table. It was an older bottle of Newberry Falls wine with one of their older labels from around the 1930s. Enrique opened the bottle and poured just a little bit and asked Shelley to taste it. He didn't want to give her too much because she was pregnant, but he needed her to sip it. And so she did. She hadn't really drank a whole lot of the family wine, but she had had a few sips over the years, and she knew that it tasted the same as any that she had had before. But that's when he told her that the bottle that she just drank from had been put into storage in this house around 1916, a few years before Prohibition started. Shelley couldn't believe it. There's no way she could be drinking wine that old. Strawberry wine doesn't last that long. It's hard enough just to get 1 year out of it, let alone several. But this was Enrique she was talking with. He wouldn't lie to her. He said that his family had been making their strawberry wine for at least 100 years, and that they had done things a certain way. Everything from the growing of the strawberries, to the beekeeping, to the making of the wine, to the handling of the wine after it's been bottled. They had a family secret that had been handed down from generation to generation that no other wine company has ever figured out how to do. And that the only people who they've ever told about this secret was Preston II and Preston III. But they did not say how they had done it. They only said that they were able to do it. And both Prestons, being good men who valued friendship and loyalty, did not press the issue. Over the years, the Preston Newberrys had become great friends, first with Rogelio and Antonia, and then with Manuel and Gabriella, and also with him, and that none of the Newberry wives had ever been told about the longevity that was possible with Newberry Falls wine. Preston II and Manuel had worked together to secure this location and to have this house built with a wine cellar deep in the ground. At the time, it was the first house built in this location. Nobody was around to see what was being built here. The idea was to stockpile some wine at this location because California has earthquakes and mudslides and forest fires, and they would always be a threat to the Newberry farm, and it would be good to have a backup supply just in case they needed it. By the time that Prohibition had started, there was already 2,000 bottles in the wine cellar below this house. Unlike so many people of that day, Preston Newberry II was not trying to stockpile to cheat Prohibition. When the Prohibition law took effect, Newberry Falls stopped producing wine, and they turned to other productions, such as strawberry sodas and jellies. Because only a few people knew about this house, it was well hidden away from the mobsters who would have gladly raided this house for their criminal enterprises. Prohibition came and went, and when it ended, some of the bottles that were in this house were sold, but not many. It didn't take long to switch production at the farm. It turns out that in the contracts for Newberry Falls wine, partial ownership goes to the Gutierrez family, and that at any time, Enrique could have enforced that contract and maintained his employment or some sort of financial control with the company. Cornelia could not shut him out if he wanted to fight her. But Enrique asked Shelley what she wanted him to do, because he felt it was really her decision. Shelley just wanted to go to college and become a veterinarian and raise her baby, and she was still hoping that Fostoria would be able to join her now that they had a place to live. But that wasn't to be. It was getting late into Shelley's pregnancy, and Fostoria was working very hard to try to get things caught up at the farm so that he could join her. But he was working too hard. Unfortunately, he came down with a sickness, a fungal infection of the lungs known as valley fever. It's not necessarily a killer if it's treated, but because Fostoria was working so hard, and because Cornelia wouldn't let him let up, because she needed him to tend both the fields and the winemaking, his condition just got worse. And one day, it overtook him, and he died. To make matters worse, Shelley didn't find out right away. There was no reason for Cornelia to let her know about Fostoria, and even if she wanted to, Shelley had not given Cornelia any way to contact her. Enrique helped Shelley to get some furniture for the baby's room and was staying with her while they waited for the baby. And the day came when Shelley went into labor and gave birth to a daughter. The plan had always been that Shelley would name the child something other than Deschler or Newberry to try to prevent Cornelia from sticking her nose in. Shelley didn't want her baby to be involved in any way with the winery. She named my last name after a man she loved, who supported her and was a good man, Preston. The plan was that when Shelley and Fostoria got married, Then they would legally change my name. About a month after I was born, there was an article in the newspaper about how Newberry Falls was looking for farm hands and winemakers after the tragic death of Fostoria Deschler. My mother was devastated. Thankfully, Enrique was there for her and for me. He sold his farm, and he did what a good best friend would do. He moved in with her, and he helped raise me. He was my Uncle Enrique, and he was very good to both of us. My mother was able to continue to go to college while Enrique did odd jobs. And then Shelley, my mother, and 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 then Shelley. Are you okay, Mom? Shelley, I, I, time began to pass. I was a little bit of a handful for my mother. I kept her busy. I kept both of them busy. Time began to pass. Enrique and my mother began to settle in as I grew. But at the same time, time was passing elsewhere, and others were trying to recover from the loss of Fostoria. Shelley wasn't the only one feeling the loss of Fostoria. Cornelia had hired some farmhands and some winemakers, but none of them measured up to her standards. Well-qualified farmers and winemakers were applying and being hired, but they didn't have the recipe for the Gutierrez wine, and they didn't have the Gutierrez method for growing more strawberries in a smaller field. And Cornelia had a short temper with everyone, and if they weren't measuring up, she would get right in their face and belittle them, and they just wouldn't put up with it. And word travels fast that you didn't want to work for her. It just wasn't worth it. To make matters worse for Cornelia, all her buyers were turning on her. She was running low on stock, and the new bottles of wine just didn't measure up to what the buyers were used to getting. It wasn't the same wine. And the buyers were threatening to stop buying wine from her if she couldn't fix the problem. Now, just exactly how it happened is controversial. From what was said by one of the maids, it's believed that Cornelia and Isabel had gone to the cellar to take inventory of the bottles. And apparently, the triplets had followed them down, and they decided to mess around with the winemaking machines in a misguided attempt to try to make wine themselves. Without warning, at least one of the boilers exploded, and it was a chain reaction with all those bottles of flammable liquid. It was almost instantaneous. Everything exploded, and all 5 of them perished in the blast. It truly was the end of the Newberry farm. Shelley had no intentions of rebuilding. She had lost enough, and it was time to let it go. She still kept the bottles in the wine cellar here, but she kept the door locked and never went in there. And it wasn't until I was about your age that she told me it existed. Shelley signed over control of Newberry Falls to a competing company, and by doing so, there was no way for her to sell these bottles and make any profit. Besides, had she told anyone about the longevity of the wine, they most surely would have bothered Enrique about his family's secret winemaking techniques, and she didn't want that for him. That was for him to decide if he ever wanted to tell somebody. The one thing that she did want to do was to start a strawberry garden, to not only be able to keep growing strawberries with Enrique, but also to keep her memories alive of the days she was farming the strawberries with Fostoria. So they planted the strawberries, and over the years, I would plant them with them. And when I was old enough, she told me about my dad. Uncle Enrique also taught me the beekeeping, but over the years, I've let go of that. I just haven't been in the condition that's required to care for those bees. My mother and Enrique would make products with some of the strawberries and sell some of those to people in the neighborhood or at farm markets. And sometimes they would donate to poorer people. That's one thing about the way that he grew these strawberries. We always had plenty, but he never let any go to waste. But the winemaking was done. My mother got through college, and she did become a vet, and she was happy, and we had a good life. No one really worried about the bills around here. The house was paid for, but because the wine cellar is there, we can't sell this house. It needs to stay in the family. Mom, are you okay? That's that's it for the Newberry story. You haven't pulled all the plants yet, have you? No, we still have those 4 back there. Good, because we need to leave those. I think we need to keep the garden going here. You're right, Tiffany. We should keep that garden going. And if Harold would like to help you, that would be good. Yeah, I'm still interested in learning how to do that Gutierrez method. I'd, I'd like to be able to grow enough to give to some poor people. I've always wanted to make a community garden, something to help some people. Young man, I like that idea. It's getting late, but we can go outside and we can at least plant a few strawberries. And we'll carry on the tradition here. That sounds great, Mom. And so we went to the backyard, and we each planted a few of the strawberries. And Mom told Harold that when the new strawberries sprouted, she'd show him how to start making the cage materials to get the plants to grow vertically. And we left the 4 that were already still there so he could use those as reference, and also to make sure that this truly was a continuation of the garden that was already there. And then it was time for Harold to go. I walked with him to the front of the house, and I said, "It's been a long day." "Yeah, it has been. It was fun. Thanks for teaching me how to dance." "Yeah, I got a couple moves. Hey, you really got some great ideas, Harold. I really do want to help you with them. You're a really great guy. I just want to tell you that I hope you never change. Don't let anybody ever change you. Well, you're really great too. Don't let anybody ever change you. You got a deal. I wanted so much to just grab onto him and never let him go. But he had to go. And he got on his bike and rode away. I wanted to shout for him to come back, but I had to go back in. I needed to go talk to my mother some more and make sure she was okay. When I walked back in, my mother was sitting at the table with a pile of mail. And she said, "Tiffany Grace Hilliard, we need to talk." "What is it, Mom?" "There's a letter from the school here." "You're taking drama." "Yes." "I was doing it to help Ivy out, but it turns out I like it. I like my teacher. I know you don't think much of drama class. Don't think anybody around here is gonna make it. Tiffany, I'm sorry." "I've said some things over the years I wish I didn't say." "Is Harold in drama class?" "Mom, he wasn't." But he is. And right now he's all the drama. Well, daughter of mine, I haven't been much of a mother to you. But if drama's what you like, then you might as well knock 'em dead. There's a letter in here, in addition to the permission slip. Your teacher, Miss Bird, tells me that you danced in one of her plays. And you had the lead role. Yeah, I auditioned as a dancer. And then we had to rewrite the play because she doesn't have much of a budget. I wish I could have seen that. I wish that too, Mom. If you'd like, I'll ask Miss Bird if she's got a videotape of it. I'm sure she does. I'd love to see that. Are you wanting to be an actress? Is that your dream? Mom, Mom, I don't really know yet. I'm giving all kinds of things a try. I'm still trying to find my way. There's a lot of complications right now in my life. A lot of things are coming together, and a lot of things are falling apart. Sometimes I can't figure out which one's which. I know. I know, Tiffany. I feel the way. I feel the same way. And I wish I was a better mother. My son hates me. No, he doesn't hate you. I'm sure he's just giving his freedom a test drive. And he's trying to figure out his life, too. I don't know where he's at, but he'll figure it out. Mama, I'm so sorry you lost Daddy. And I'm sorry that it made you sad. And I hope that Uncle Donald is making you happy. And that you are feeling better soon. Whatever you're doing, please keep doing it. And if you need me, you just let me know. Tiffany, it's not just Daddy. Every time I look at you, I see her. I see her beautiful face. I see her beautiful face as she got sick and as she died. Mama, who? Do you mean Grandma? Yes, Tiffany. Shelley got cancer when I was about your age. She died. It, it destroyed her. She tried to fight, but she lost. And every time I look at you, I see her. And I'm filled with joy that I have you. And I'm filled with devastation over watching her suffer. I miss her so much. And I had kids, and I was starting to get happy. And then Daddy. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, Tiffany. I love you so much. I'm a disgrace. Mom, you're not a disgrace. You never were. You didn't get a chance to be the mom that you could have been, but you're still my mom, and I'm always gonna love you. Always. 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 Thank you for watching episode 9 of World Without You.